Welcome, and we are so glad that you're here for another fireside chat. Not really, there's no fire here. It would feel good though, because it's kind of cold in this room all the time. But regardless, a mental health and wellness chat. I'm Brittany, and I am here with
Madison,
and we are two of your VC Counseling Center counselors.
an associate.
And we are here to have real conversations about the emotional challenges that students face and discuss navigating them. So in today's episode, we're going to dive into the topic of sitting with tough emotions. So we're going to look at what that actually even means, why it matters, and how we can build the strength to face discomfort rather than trying to run from it. So whether it's anxiety, sadness, shame, or just feeling overwhelmed, we all experience emotions that can be really difficult to sit with. So we always like to start off here with just some general definitions, right? So what do we mean when we say tough emotions? So Madison, what are your thoughts? What would you classify as a tough emotion?
A tough emotion, I would say, is grief, whether that's a loved one passing, the end of a relationship, losing a job that you loved. Grief can present in so many different ways. That's always a really difficult one. Another one I would say is loneliness. Especially when we get to college, we might be moving away from friends and family. We might have to kind of start over with a social group, and it can be really lonely. It's a big adjustment to make, and that can be hard for people who feel alone, in this big environment. Yeah.
Well, and we're such social creatures too. I feel like loneliness is such a big one for so many people that none of us want to feel completely alone. Especially, I feel like as we adjust into college life too, a lot of times people are getting married or like partnering off. And if we're not in the same situation, it can be really difficult to feel lonely and like buy into that social comparison
For
too.
sure.
Well, on top of it too, another great one a really common one is fear.
Yes.
So be that fear-based anxiety, be it fear of the future, fear of the unknown, fear of failure, whatever the fear might be, a lot of times we find ourselves attempting to avoid fear. And same thing, I think the biggest one is rejection. We all struggle with coping with the feeling of rejection or feeling rejected, whether that's actual rejection, like not getting a job, or whether it's perceived rejection, like doubting if other people like me, or if people want to be my friend, or if people actually care about me. So really it can look like any emotion at the end of the day. That doesn't have to be any of the emotions that we listed here, but these are just some of the most common ones that we see as counselors in general that most people tend to try to avoid rather than sit with.
For sure. So when we say sit with emotions rather than avoiding them, you might be wondering, what exactly does that look like? It sounds so easy, just sit with it. But, it can be a process that you have to get used to. So when I think of sitting with emotions, that is kind of just allowing the emotion to be. We're not, impulsively reacting to it. We're not judging it for happening. We're not resisting it from happening. We're just, observing it, being mindful of our experience, and just kind of letting it pass through us like a wave. That's how I always like to view it.
And I love how even when we try to describe this, it still comes off so counselory
It does.
because sit with emotions is such a counselory term. And a lot of times people will say, like, what do you even mean by that? Like, obviously, I sit with my emotions. They're inside of me all the time and I feel them 24/7. But I like the way you framed what it is because, and it feels like we're splitting hairs, and we'll get into like a real example later. Like, I'll go through a little script with you of what this can actually look like because there is a big difference between feeling an emotion, going down the roller coaster, reacting, maybe doing or saying or feeling things that we don't might regret later or we don't mean, and actually sitting with allowing an emotion to be and then moving on with our day. But like I said, we'll get into, I know this is very abstract, but we'll get into a concrete example here in a little bit. But the biggest thing here is this idea that in general, we tend to avoid feeling emotions. Yes, emotions happen and we do feel them, but a lot of the times we go off on a tangent, go down the thought rabbit hole. We actively attempt to get away from it. We try to distract ourselves. We try to avoid it. And, a lot of times for a lot of people, who wants to feel rejection?
Exactly.
Who wants to feel sad? Nobody wants to feel that way.
No.
So it's normal to try to escape it and make it stop or make it not last very long.
Yeah.
But when we sit with emotions, typically we do this with emotions that like come up a lot, where it's like, if you're feeling rejection, frequently, then maybe the argument could be sitting with it might be a better way of coping with it than just trying to avoid it because it keeps coming back.
Exactly.
Maybe that's like for a reason,
Yeah. And there's always a function to avoidance. I'm sure we've touched on this in other episodes. You're getting something out of avoiding these emotions, right? Or else you wouldn't continue this pattern. And, that's okay to kind of recognize and accept that maybe that is what you're doing. But we can also recognize that there's healthier ways to go about it.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I do want to point out a lot of times people will intellectualize, and this coming from an intellectualizer, the queen of intellectualization myself. A lot of times whenever we feel an uncomfortable emotion, sometimes we'll just intellectualize it. And what I mean by that is I will think it, overthink it. Why do I feel this way? I'll investigate it. All these counselor skills, right, that we're taught to do that are very thought based. We'll overthink the emotion. We'll try to tell ourselves that's not rational. Let me, replace that. Like gold star in terms of therapy skills, right? But ultimately, sometimes when that thought or that feeling keeps coming back and keeps coming back and keeps coming back, for me, this is usually a sign like, okay, maybe I should look at sitting with this, because sometimes just allowing yourself to feel the emotion rather than avoid it, escape it, intellectualize it can actually help me work through the emotion rather than, just thinking through it.
Yes.
So a lot of times I'll encourage people to do thoughts and cognitive strategies and, let's rationalize with this, let's replace this thought. But sometimes when we get stuck is when I'm like, okay, let's look at sitting with this instead, because, this might be more beneficial and might break the block that we're having right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And like you said, it's so common to just start overthinking because thinking can feel a lot safer than actually feeling the emotion in that moment. So it's totally understandable why it happens.
And it feels like we have control when we're thinking too. Like if I get in there and replace this thought or think something different, then I won't feel this way.
Yep.
But sometimes, emotions are rooted so deeply that sometimes we just feel it anyway. It's part of being human. And, normalizing again that everyone avoids tough emotions. Most people do. We've all done it. Nobody wants to feel awful. Nobody wants to feel sad all day long. No one wants to feel rejected and unlovable all day long. So this is, once again, totally normal process that we do as humans.
Yeah. Okay. So like Brittany said earlier, we are going to give y'all a, more detailed kind of practice for sitting with emotions, but just a brief rundown of what it looks like to sit with an emotion. There's a few steps I can go through with y'all. So first we want to acknowledge the emotion, just say, hey, I'm feeling something. That's the first stepping point for this process. Then we want to locate it in our body. Whenever we experience emotions, there's usually physical sensations that come along with it. Maybe that looks like tightness in your chest, or you feel a hot flash run over your body. You might get tension or some kind of headache. So like we've talked about in previous episodes, physical and mental combined together a lot of times whenever we're experiencing emotions. Then we want to focus on breathing, just focusing on calming ourselves down, just being in the present moment. And then it also helps to kind of validate your emotion, let yourself know it's okay to feel this way. It's understandable why this emotion is coming up for you. And then lastly, just want to focus on grounding in the present moment and bringing yourself back.
Yeah, no, and that's a really great, brief rundown. Like we said, we'll go through a full script here in a little bit, and it's pretty short, honestly. So it's something that, for example, I just memorize this and then I can run myself through it in those moments. But there are also, short snippets on podcasts and, YouTube and stuff that you can go through and play this, at least initially, for yourself. So yeah, some of the most common misconceptions that we see about sitting with uncomfortable feelings or handling uncomfortable feelings is that, I feel like the biggest one for me is that emotions are bad, that or negative emotions are bad. I don't want to feel them. I shouldn't feel whatever this negative emotion is.
Yes.
When in reality, I mean, we're humans. You're gonna feel negative emotions sometimes. And I feel like whether we acknowledge it explicitly or not, a lot of times we might hold this expectation that I should feel happy most of the time, or else something is wrong with my life. And while I feel like this is a very complicated topic to unpack, yes, you should feel content if everything in your life is up to the standards that you want it to be, technically. However, like we've talked about before, there's some times where you might just have a bad day, or you might just be in a bad mood, or you might have things coming up from childhood or in the past, or even triggers within current romantic partners or in life. I mean, even when things are objectively fine in your life and you're living the life that you want, it's not uncommon to just feel sad for no reason or to just
Exactly.
feel anxious. Emotions are, I like to think of emotions as information about the world, one
Mhm.
type of information, right? So, an emotion for me helps me stop and ask myself, like, okay, if I'm feeling anxious every time I go to work, then let's look at work and see, is there anything here that could be causing this anxiety for me? And if not, then it's like, okay, what else could be contributing to a feeling of anxiety at work? Could it be my own expectations? Could it, and so this is what I'm getting at, though, is that it's a type of information, right? And emotion lets me know that something's going on so that I can know to investigate that thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. With the idea of viewing emotions as bad, I like to say there's no such thing as good or bad emotions. They are just messengers that we need to tune into.
Oh, I
And
like
it's
that. Yeah.
it's not about how, what we experience. We like to validate people's emotional experiences. I think it's more about how you handle it and how you respond to it more than anything.
Yeah.
Because we can feel all different kinds of emotions, but there's a big difference between reacting to it and not the best way versus responding to it in more effective ways.
Yeah. And even like you said, it can even be helpful to reframe, this isn't a negative emotion or a bad emotion. This is just an uncomfortable
Uncomfortable is
emotion
the
because
yes,
this
for
emotion
sure.
is making me uncomfortable.
And that's fair to
Why?
say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why does this one make me uncomfortable?
Mhm.
And sometimes the answer is as simple as it's rejection. No one wants to feel rejected,
Nope.
which is normalizing when I talk to myself in that way. So, yeah. So, why, this may feel like an obvious question, but why is it so hard to sit in discomfort for people?
I mean, what comes to mind for me is that a lot of the times we're not even taught how to do that
Yeah,
growing
no,
up. Like
we're not.
a
No.
lot of us don't have good models for emotional regulation, emotional processing, whenever we're young. And so we
Mhm.
just go through life being unsure of how to handle these huge emotions that are coming up for me. And so of course it's going to feel really overwhelming and incredibly scary and unmanageable
Yeah.
whenever we experience them. So that's something that comes to mind for me first. Like, okay, you know, just recognizing, hey, I didn't have a good model for this growing up.
And I think a really great example, I don't know about your parents, but my parents were peak generation where when I cried or got uncomfortable, it made them uncomfortable. So it
Mhm.
was like, stop crying, stop
Yes.
doing that, stop
Yes.
feeling that way, or, don't do that. And while, yes, harmless on the surface, I mean, it kind of ties into your point, though, of rather than sitting down and saying, hey, let's go through this together, let's
Mhm.
breathe, tell me what you're feeling, let's talk it through, it was just don't feel that way. So it would make
Yeah.
sense that as an adult, raised in that type of an environment, it would be appropriate to just say, I just don't want to feel this, let me escape it, let me avoid it.
Yeah. You learn that having emotions, expressing emotions is inappropriate. That's,
Yeah.
the message you got growing up. So of
Yeah.
course it's understandable. Another thing is just in college, this fast paced environment, maybe you feel like you have so much on your plate. I don't even have time to slow down
Yeah.
and deal with this emotion. Like I just got to keep trucking through, or
Mhm.
so I'm going to get behind on my schoolwork or whatever it is for you.
Yeah.
So it just feels like you don't have the time to sit with this uncomfortable emotion that you're experiencing.
Who has time for self-work? I hear that a lot. Like, with
Yeah,
what time, Brittany, am I supposed to
exactly.
just feel a feeling when I have 3 tests this week and too much
Hmm.
going? I feel like another really great point to bring up too, though, is social media, cultural expectations, stigma about mental health, and how this relates with processing emotions, sitting with emotions, right? Because I feel like obviously we all know social media plays a big part in this percent, like people's highlight reels, right? Of, you know, everything's going well for me.
Hmm.
I'm, able to regulate my emotions. And then even just stigma about why would you want to sit in an emotion? Isn't the point of therapy to stop feeling bad emotions and to
Yeah.
feel better? You know what I
Hmm.
mean? I feel like it's such a trap. Because ultimately, yeah, like, you know, we do so much normalization on the show, but I guess it's worth explicitly mentioning that, a lot of times tough emotions come up at the times that are most inconvenient. They don't come up at a convenient time, if that makes sense. So when I'm in a high stress environment and I've got a million things going on, typically that's when things start to show up, not when I'm relaxing on the couch and I have free time. Like, let me sit with my emotions now. Rarely ever are you going to feel a negative emotion in that time. Usually these things are triggered in high stress environments or situations where it's almost automatic.
Definitely. So another good thing to kind of think and reflect about is some ways that friends or peers can support someone who's going through a tough emotional time without trying to fix the situation.
So fixers,
yes. So, what does that look like? Because there can be so many times whenever we want to talk to someone, we want to kind of vent, just get everything out. And the people we're talking to immediately come in with, oh, well, try this or do this. They're trying to, like you said, fix the situation, give you a solution. And sometimes that is what we want. But there's other times when we just want to express what we're feeling. And that's all we want from that person. So sometimes, friends can be like, do you want someone to listen or do you want, solutions? And that can give them the choice of, hey, I just really need to talk. I'd really just appreciate you listening to me while I explain what's been going on for me.
Well, and like we've talked about before too, even a simple question of, how can I support you right now? What friend do you want me to be?
Exactly.
And I pick on, Blake for this too, because she's really good at that, right? She'll, anytime that I have something I'm processing with her, she'll say, she always drops it on me and it frustrates me so much because she'll be like, do you want me to be a supportive friend right now and listen to you? Or do you want feedback about this? And I love it so much because it's such a counselor response, but it sometimes frustrates me because I'm just like, well, you should just know what I want. When in reality, like, no, she should not read my mind. But yeah, no. And it's tough because I see both sides of this, right? So yes, you obviously want to help, and helping for us as a society is providing a solution. And while that is helpful on the surface, sometimes on the receiving end of that, if you're telling me, well, Brittany, just stop feeling that way, it feels very minimizing of like, my problems aren't big, that they're easy to fix, that, it can lead into a thought spiral where someone feels invalidated. And that's not everyone, but sometimes this can be a problem.
Yeah.
So like we said, sometimes it can be as simple as saying like, Madison, how can I best support you right now? And then she can let me know what she needs. And then I can, take the guesswork out of the game, be direct, just ask people, what do you need from me right now? Like I said, you'd be surprised about the answers. And then you can actually like meet other people's needs. And this is something too to reflect on within ourselves, even of, when other people come to me for support, what uncomfortable emotion comes up that leads to me feeling like I need to fix something for them? Is it that I'm uncomfortable with their emotion? Is it that I'm uncomfortable with emotions in general? Is it that I feel like I don't have anything good to say, so I need to just get out of the conversation? I mean, the possibilities are endless, but we can even flip that mirror around on ourselves of what makes me so uncomfortable to support other people.
That's a great question, because I feel like sometimes people will say, oh, I hate when people cry around me. Or I hate when people come to me, in that regard. And so, that's a great point. I didn't even consider that, but yeah.
Cause it is, I mean, it's the question of like I said, what makes that experience so uncomfortable for you? And the most common answer that I hear is, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't have an answer for them. I can come up with solutions, but I know that that's not the right thing to say, but I don't know what I'm supposed to be saying. Like, I don't know what to do with my hands right now, but it's like, once again, we come back, we've talked about this so many times, like, you don't have to have an answer. No one's expecting you to have an answer. It's just about connecting with people at the end of the day. And people, ask yourself, what do you want when you're struggling and you come to someone for help? What do you want in that moment? A lot of times we just want to feel understood, heard, and like somebody cares at the end of the day. And we can use that to guide how we interact with other people.
Yeah, definitely. Listening is such a huge part of just being there for someone. So don't ever feel like that's not enough, Just being present for someone, like you said, seeing them, hearing them for what they have to say is huge.
Yeah. Another common fear that we see a lot too is this fear with sitting with emotions that we're going to somehow get overwhelmed and totally crumble and break as a human being. That our emotions are going to swallow us up in some way, and we're going to get into this black hole and we're never going to come out, and chaos, right? when ultimately that is so rare that
Yeah.
that ever happens to a person. A lot of times people feel a lot more relief after we process their emotions. And this is a skill too. Like, all this to say, obviously the podcast isn't therapy or counseling is no substitute for any of that. But sometimes when this is a very intimidating thing for us, it can be helpful to come to counseling to walk through this process with a counselor with you. Sometimes that can make people feel a little bit more secure. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times in sessions, I'll do it with people the first couple of times and then give them an assignment of, okay, over the next week, I want you to go home and I want you to do this on your own. When you feel an uncomfortable emotion, practice sitting with it for as long as you can. And then you can avoid all you want after that, but at least sit with it for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then if it's not gone, go back to your usual coping skills, but kind of practicing doing this to kind of even show ourselves that, you're a lot stronger than you think. You're not going to break if you feel rejected. That's absolutely not going to happen 99.9% of the time.
Yeah, because every time we avoid, we're never giving ourselves the opportunities to show ourselves that we can handle these difficult emotions and that they're a lot more manageable than we might even think.
Yeah, a lot less scary.
Yes.
The process of avoidance is what makes them so scary. Once I start sitting in rejection and saying, it's okay to feel rejection, and I feel rejected, and I'm okay, and I'm not going to die, and I'm surviving. Slowly over time, we realize, you're right, I'm not going to die. I do survive even if I feel that way. And, I was avoiding something that isn't as life ending as I thought that it was.
Yes.
Ultimately, for sure. So, okay, let's do a quick script. I do not have a radio voice if you haven't figured that out yet, but I will do my best to do a calm, soothing voice, but this is absolutely not my strong suit. So buckle in. So we're going to start with sitting comfortably. So wherever you are right now, get comfortable in your chair or, wherever you are on the floor, whatever. And I want you to close your eyes. And if you're uncomfortable closing your eyes, you can also just soften your gaze and kind of make your eyes a little bit blurry. So we're going to take a slow, deep breath in. And then we're going to exhale fully. So I'm going to ask myself, okay, right now I'm feeling, and we're going to name the emotion, anxious, sad, angry, whatever it might be. And we're going to remind ourselves, I don't need to fix this or push it away. I'm just noticing what I'm feeling. And I'm going to watch it like a cloud in the sky. I'm going to watch it pass. It's slowly floating by, a leaf in a river, whatever metaphor you prefer. And then I'm going to ask myself, okay, where do I feel this emotion in my body? Is it in my chest? Is it in my stomach? Is it in my shoulders? Where can I feel this emotion? And I'm going to gently bring my attention to that place. There's no judgment. It's just awareness. I'm just being aware of what it feels like. Is it tight? Is it burning? What sensations? How could you describe that feeling to someone else? And then I'm going to breathe in, bringing space and calm to that part of my body. And I'm going to breathe out, release tension, resistance. I'm going to breathe. I like to also imagine breathing out the emotion. So, and sometimes it can help to assign a color to it. So, like, for example, anger, red, right? So I'm going to breathe in blue, calm air, and out red, anger air. And then I'm going to remind myself it is all right to feel this. Emotions are not dangerous. Emotions do not kill me. This feeling is part of being human. I can handle this emotion, even if it is very uncomfortable for me. I'm going to remind myself that right now I'm safe. I'm here. I'm breathing in this moment. There's nothing scary. There's no lion chasing me. Everything's all right. I don't need all the answers. I just need to be present in this moment right now. So once again, to recap, all that we're going to do is acknowledge what the emotion is, locate it in our body, breathe through it, validate that it's normal to feel things, and then we're just going to ground back in the present moment. And yeah, that's it. Realistically,
Great.
I mean,
I feel
that's
so
it.
much more relaxed after hearing your voice, Brittany. Oh my gosh.
I thank you for lying to me, but you don't have to continue lying to me in that way. But, and this is all that it is really. And that's why I say it's such a simple script. And yes, it feels like, the counselor-y thing, but ultimately, like I said, the goal is, especially when we're avoiding emotions a lot, just do this for as long as you can. And if the emotion starts getting too much, that's fine. Sit with it for a second and then go do your normal coping skill. But ultimately, the goal is to sit with this longer and longer until we're sitting through the entire emotion. And then by the time that we sit through the whole emotion and we can sit with it and feel it go away, like start to resolve as we're sitting there, a lot of times that's where we can feel the relief. And then it's not something that you do one time and then it's fixed and you never feel that again. No, you're human. You're going to feel rejected a lot in your life. You're going to feel scared a lot in your life. But ultimately, we're just kind of teaching our body that it's okay to feel these emotions and we're not going to die if we do. Because it's like our body almost convinces us that if I feel this, it's going to be the end of the world. When in reality, it's so not true.
Yeah, it's all about practicing, and this can be a life-changing skill.
For sure. So, okay, that's all we have today. Thank you for joining us today in your go-to space for honest conversations about mental health and well-being. We're your hosts, Brittany
and Madison,
and we are so glad that you spent part of your day with us. So remember, taking care of your mind is just as important as taking care of your body. Be kind to yourself, reach out if you need support, and know that you are never alone. Until next time, take care and take a